Hey everybody, Adam Savage in Fon Davis's cave. We're at Fonco in LA. How are you, my friend?
I'm good.
Fon and I worked on a lot of movies together back in the day, and a couple of them were the Star Wars prequels episodes. Well, I worked on episodes 1 and 2. You worked on 1, 2, and 3.
1, 2, and 3, and then the special editions.
Right. That was before that, right?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I think that's how George tested the waters to see if the world was ready for more Star Wars.
Did you get to work on that Star Destroyer restoration?
Yes.
This conning tower of the Star Destroyer went to the Smithsonian, right?
It was the whole thing. It was the 8-foot Star Destroyer from Empire Strikes Back, and it was mounted on a steel pylon that attached to the internal armature of the craft, which is how you mount them when you shoot them. And they loaded it into the semi-truck. They got it there, and then on the way back, just the vibration of the semi-truck, and the Star Destroyer was just on this one pylon. This is before they started shipping things like they, with the respect that they deserve. And the vibration and everything drove the pylon through the ship, and the ship ended up on, so when it got to ILM, the Star Destroyer was on the ground, and the pylon and the armature was just up on its stick.
All through
with
it?
Pieces littered throughout the truck.
I saw pictures of you guys all working on it.
It was a lot of and we were very faithful to the original orientation of all the parts. So it was like building a 3-dimensional puzzle. Any of the greebles or the pieces that fell off, we would
you had to
we would hold them on and see if the glue where it cracked would match the same shape as the part. And we did that we had just bags and bags, little Ziploc bags of parts that we had to glue back on. That's after we repaired the whole top.
After the structure was done. Oh my god.
And we had to redo all the fiber optics.
There's
I think it's over a half a mile of fiber optics in that model.
For every little blinky light you see is a separate.
Every single window is a fiber optic,
Okay, so we were planning to shoot this video, and we still will talk about these maquette models and model making in general, but I'm actually really curious because it hadn't occurred to me, but as you were putting that together, that Star Destroyer was built in the 80s, right?
Yes.
So what about its construction surprised you? Were there any things that weren't being done anymore by our generation that you learned from looking at the interior?
Actually, it's interesting. There was a lot more acrylic structure than I was thinking there would be, because that's something that we had definitely phased out.
Yeah.
For later builds, we would use plywood even.
Plywood for the interior and then styrene for the exterior.
Steel
Acrylic's
and
just a
aluminum
pain in
and
the
wood.
butt.
Well, it's brittle.
Yeah.
So also, I mean, we built, to be fair, everything that we built for the prequels, we knew was going to end up in an exhibit somewhere, because they had already been doing exhibits for Star Wars props.
Right.
So everything we built as if it were going to a museum exhibit.
Right. We're finishing every last bit of it. And back then, Steve and Lauren and those guys, they're just getting it done for the shot.
You just got to get it into the stage.
Right.
So it's a completely different standard. So so a lot of the older models aren't
built to
the
last
level
for
of
50
finish,
years.
and they're not built to last. Yeah. We used to joke at Colossal Pictures, if your model fell apart on the way out of the stage after the shoot, you built the perfect model.
That was Jamie's axiom about Mythbusters. We built it to work for the day we're experimenting, and if it falls to pieces, we've done exactly the right
And he
amount
worked
of
at Colossal, so he probably got that there.
That's right. I have seen behind-the-scenes pictures with big sheets of acrylic in the Star Destroyer and in the Millennium Falcon.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about maquettes, because this is a lot of the kind of work that we would do that was some of the most fun work.
Yeah.
Like, I like to point out to people who think that working in special effects is a dream job, like every other job, it is still 90% drudgery and tedium, and it's exhausting.
And a lot of terror.
Yeah, right. Abject terror.
Deadline terror.
Of being on set while everyone's staring at your model that doesn't work.
Yes.
But every now and then, if you do the tedious stuff with enough assiduous dedication, you get a chance to do something really fun.
Yeah.
And this is an example of one thing I did where early on in the production process for episode 2, Brian Gernan, our supervisor, said they'd like to see a maquette of the predecessor to the T11 Skyhopper. So I chose to make this the T11 Skyhopper. And I followed many of the form factors. I added these more curvy engine nacelles, that's vacuum formed. I added this curved engine cowling in the back. And apparently, it was one of the first meetings of maquettes for episode 2, and George saw it and he goes, well, the only reason we made the T16 look like it did is because we only had plywood and no time. And so Brian brought this back to me and he's like, George didn't like anything about this. I guess just keep it. And I'm hoping that no one's going to get pissed off that I still have it. If you do, I guess call me. But this is classic ILM model making. Styrene, basic construction, greeblies on the underside. Can you talk about what it was like to go up into the loft for getting greeblies?
Oh, it's like a kid in a candy store, definitely. Well, first of all, you when you went up into the loft, you knew that some of that stuff had been around since at least Empire Strikes Back.
Right.
And so digging
and this is
through
this is a loft of model kits for detailing.
Yeah.
Detailing.
Just also cast off models from previous shows, which is always really amazing too. But they had, we had our go-tos. We definitely had our go-to kits that were there, and every Plastruct part in the catalog.
Every Plastruct part.
All the evergreen in the catalog. Yeah, it was amazing.
There were Star Wars ships, lots of Star Wars model toys, because they were based off castings that had been designed in-house, so we just used that stuff as well.
Yeah.
So I remember going up with a tray and just going through the models, and then you'd like have a pair of nippers, and you'd end up with this little palette of sort of detailing. Mm-hmm. And then you'd sit there with your model and you'd be like, oh, I think this one might go doop there. And now I'm looking at this. I was just asking Fon, is that an Eagle lander? Is that one of the Earl kits from 1999? Or wait, they didn't make the 1999 kits.
It's crazy as you think you would never forget that stuff when you're doing it, and then one day you forget.
Totally.
It's not what you'd expect.
I still pick up a Hasegawa model and I can tell that it's Hasegawa just by the quality of the castings, the quality of the molding. The same thing with Tamiya.
Yeah. It's true.
Mad respect for those.
Yeah. I've always really admired the art of greebling. I think it's undervalued in the world of model making, because it's not just grabbing random parts and putting them on.
Explain why.
Because it's got to look like it serves a purpose. And then there's also a lot, and we learned all this at ILM.
On the fly.
And every show had its aesthetic. So
and
it wasn't like the same.
No one wrote any of this stuff down.
That's right. We would talk about it at lunch. There was a game, I'm going to sidetrack a little. There was a game where we would write on a piece of paper just 3 shapes, and we would hold it up, and everyone in the lunchroom would have to guess whether it was Star Wars or Star Trek. And everyone in that room was really good at nailing that. But everything had an aesthetic, and it included the greebles, and you didn't want to overdo greebles. You'll notice that there's always a smart use of open space, and then a cluster of greebles, and then maybe another cluster of greebles connected with a pipe or two.
But this is the very Star Wars aesthetic, because what you just described doesn't happen in Star Trek. In Star Trek, you might have 5 things that are all the same, all lined up next to each other. It's a utopia. 5 unbroken things. But in Star Wars, there'd always be the 4th one is missing and there's a rust streak.
Yep.
Star Wars is, we haven't gotten around to fixing that part yet. Star Trek is, we worked it all out a long time ago.
It'll always be that one pipe that went off to just a box.
Mm-hmm. I think you and I both had a similar moment, which was, we've shared a mentor in Mitch Romanowski.
Yes.
Who was an amazing, unbelievable model problem solver. Just incredible. And Mitch ran the shop at Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yes.
And you worked on that show.
Yep.
But when Mitch first got up to ILM, one of the first things he said to me is, we're working at a desk together, and Mitch goes, dude, we're at ILM. Do you know what that means? And I said, what? He goes, it means we're wizards. Because every news story about ILM were the wizards up in San Rafael, California. But then, after we'd been working a bit on Star Wars and then a little Galaxy Quest and then back on Star Wars, Mitch came to both you and I at some point and was like, dudes, can you walk me through the Star Wars Star Trek thing again? And we were like, oh, sit down, boss. We'll fill you in on the whole thing.
Those are proud moments for sure. Mitch also had this uncanny ability to get so much done without ever looking like he was working.
I never remember him rushing at all.
Crazy. Because, he was never in a hurry. He never walked quickly. He always had a coffee mug with him.
Yeah.
And somehow he would always hit all his targets, which a lot of model makers couldn't. No. It was very, very difficult work. And I still don't, to this day, I have no idea how he got it done.
There was a thing at ILM where if you weren't going to hit your mark, though, it wasn't like someone was going to tell you. So like most often, you just notice someone else would be sitting next to you, and they'd be like, "Hey, I'm here to help you for the day," and you'd be like, "Okay," and then you'd think, "I guess I'm not hitting my marks."
That's how
Right?
it worked. Yep.
You didn't get yelled at. You just got a little more help.
Yeah.
I got yelled at after the fact, right? Like it took a little longer than it should have. And when at the end of the T2 set, because I went over.
Oh, right.
T3.
Yeah.
At the end of that set,
Yeah.
Brian told me, you took a little bit long to take care of us in that last.
They started tracking things closer so we can get those numbers real time later.
Yeah.
That made it a lot easier. But yeah, before that, we were just guessing. I think we spent this much.
Will you talk about these two beautiful ships for a second?
Okay, so this is kind of funny. This actually dips into my childhood because Steve Gawley was
one of the original ILM model makers on Star Wars and everything
I think he's
since.
the only one that has his own trading card of just him on it, building a Star Destroyer, and this is the original Orange series from the 70s.
Oh, man.
So I've got that card. I worked with him at James the Giant Peach before I got to ILM.
I didn't realize he was on that.
Yeah, and so I of course, totally nerded out on him and had a lot of fun talking about this stuff. And he loved sharing it because I don't know if he was around.
Steve was super good about sharing it and remembered everything.
Yeah.
Like he would tell you, "Oh yeah, I found that Gridley and then ho."
So one of the biggest debates among model makers when I was making the TIE Fighter model kits was, what color is it? Because in the original movie, they overexposed the film and they looked white or a very light gray.
Yeah.
And then in Empire Strikes Back, they were kind of a blue-gray. And everyone thought that they actually changed the color of the TIE Fighter from one movie to the next, but it was just the way they shot them, and they were still exactly the same color.
Wow.
And then so the next question was, what color is that? And then Steve actually told me which paint, and I immediately had to build a TIE Fighter so I could paint it with the color that he told me about.
Now, speaking of Steve and paint, I think we should cover one thing that Steve was unbelievable at, which was walking into a room you were painting a model in and touching the wet part.
Yes.
Swear to God, this guy, Steve is the nicest guy in the world, but you walk in and go, hey, that model looks really, oh, buddy, I'm really sorry. I just put a huge thumbprint right there. And you'd be like, what? I don't know how. He always somehow had this. He had to touch your model where the paint was.
He'll be happy to know I've been following in his footsteps.
Oh, have you really?
In recent years, yes.
Dude, thanks for covering a little memory lane with me.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, you guys. We are. This is Adam and Fon from Fon's Cave Fonco. See you next time.